All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome back to our 11th Annual Financial Executive Forum. I want to thank you all for joining us again this morning. This is the sixth and final event of our 2025 webinar series. It's been a great 6 weeks of learning for all of us, and the time has really flown by. We really appreciate you joining us this morning. My name is Grant Palmer, and I'm a partner with Cordia Resources by Cherry Beckert, one of the sponsors for this series. As you know, we also have four other great sponsors who I will reintroduce shortly. I also want to thank Ben Kane, Tim Quinlan, and Jay Wilcox from Wells Fargo Bank for presenting last week on their economic update, Let's Get Digital, Banking Automation with APIs and Embedded Finance. It was another informative and entertaining program from the Wells Fargo team, so thanks again for that. Our sponsors have been excited to see such a great response with over 1,500 people registered for the series. We know and understand how valuable these high quality and relevant training events are to financial professionals managing corporate accounting and financial functions. Today, we're joined by Cordia Resources by Cherry Beckert with Nat Jones, who will be leading our CFO Roundtable. Nat has an excellent group of CFOs that we will introduce shortly. You should also know that we have a great team from Cherry Beckert running our virtual program today, but please bear with us should there be any technical issues. As you can see, we have 6 great programs in this year's series. If you fully have attended all 6 and you're a CPA, you can earn up to 12 full CPE credits. Our series includes, as we mentioned just a minute ago, last week the Wells Fargo banking team presented their economic update and Let's Get Digital. And today, as mentioned earlier, we have the Cordia Resources by Cherry Beckert team with the CFO Roundtable. Before we move forward, I'd like to cover our basic CPE webinar rules. In terms of NASBA compliance, our polling questions will appear throughout the webinar. You will need to answer 75% of the 8 polling questions to receive full CPE credit for each session. Any answer to a polling question, correct or incorrect, counts towards the 75%. Since you'll be muted during the entire session, please use the Q&A feature to submit your questions to the panelists. Please use the chat feature to communicate any technical issues that you may have. After the program, please complete the session survey using the link that we will send to you in the post-event email. Your CPE certificate should be issued within 10 days of this course. If you have any questions, please reach out to Cherry Beckert Learning at cbhlearning@cbh.com. Now, I'd like to acknowledge our great team of sponsors for this entire 2025 Financial Executive Forum series. First is Sage, a leader in finance, AI, and automation with a financial management solution that has helped over 30,000 businesses achieve higher performance by providing the automation, connected insights, and trust and control needed to increase impact and drive real results. Sage is a returning sponsor this year and is represented by Gary Mayer, Senior Channel Executive at Sage. Our next sponsor is Cherry Beckert, a top 25 nationally ranked accounting firm specializing in tax, audit, outsourced accounting, advisory, and system services, who is represented by Tracy Sheps, a CPA and a partner at Cherry Beckert. Our third sponsor is Marsh McLennan Agency, a leading provider of business insurance, employee and health benefits, retirement, and private client insurance to organizations and individuals. Marsh is also a returning sponsor this year and is represented by Allie Gregory, Vice President in the Employee Health and Benefit Practice. Our fourth sponsor is Wells Fargo Bank. Wells Fargo, a well-known national bank, is represented by Executive Director Ben Kane. Wells Fargo Commercial Banking is a returning and longtime sponsor of the Financial Executive Forum. And our fifth and final sponsor is Cordia Resources by Cherry Beckert, a leader in recruiting and staffing services in accounting and finance, technology, HR, contracts, and administrative support services, and is represented by Doug Smith, one of our managing directors who leads our sales and staffing services team at Cordia Resources. As you can see, we have a very full agenda today. Also, please stay tuned at the end of today's program to view summary results from the Cherry Beckert Modernization in Motion Insights from Middle Market CFOs Survey Report and how you can download your copy. Today, Cordia Resources is presenting its CFO Roundtable led by Nat Jones, a managing director with Cordia Resources by Cherry Beckert. Our roundtable of CFOs include Maria Izurieta of Huntress, Rob Smith of Crescent Hotels and Resorts, and Doug Kuckelman of ICI Mutual Insurance. And with that, welcome Nat Jones.
Thank you so much, Grant. Fantastic work through this entire series. I imagine you're probably saying this stuff in your sleep, so the work is almost done, buddy. Great work so far. Good morning, everyone. It's great to be with you. I'm Nat Jones, Managing Director with Cordia Resources by Cherry Beckert. It is awesome to welcome all of you to the CFO panel this year for 2025. In a nutshell, I'm a recruiting veteran by trade, sometimes feel like a CFO by osmosis, and I like to joke that I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do when I grow up. So if anybody has any ideas, please feel free to put them in the chat today. But seriously, I help lead our permanent placement practice for all levels of finance and accounting. We help CFOs, controllers, HR, and IT leaders, simply stated, solve their talent problems. For those of you who have not found us for any permanent or temporary hire, we would love an opportunity to earn your business. So with that, I'm absolutely honored to lead the final event of the 2025 Financial Executive Forum, which, by the way, we have over 1,500 attendees this year, which I think is pretty epic. And hopefully next year, we can double that and get to 3,000. So it goes without saying that we appreciate everyone's support, engagement, and commitment each and every year. We really enjoy being with all of you and watching the learning take place each and every year. So you guys are in for a real treat today with this panel. My advice is get cozy, make yourself comfortable, grab a beverage of your choice. We're going to come at you today with some great takeaways, some fascinating content, and some juicy information about how to make your career better and more productive. I'm very lucky to have gotten to know these three panelists, and I think you will find that Maria, Rob, and Doug all bring exciting stories and unique paths. Of course, for you all, we do have a few goals in mind with this panel. We want today to have a direct impact on your careers. We really hope that you get some takeaways and some meaningful advice and maybe some thought-provoking ideas about your own professional journey. Nothing fires me up more than hearing that our content affects change and delivers fresh insights to you as working leaders. Just a quick housekeeping note. We will begin with individual introductions and one-on-one sessions with each of our three CFOs, followed by a group session, and then eventually winding down with some Q&A from our audience in the last 10 minutes. With that, we will begin my first introduction and one-on-one with Maria Izurieta.
Good morning. How are you? And congratulations on getting my last name correct. That's a feat all in itself this early in the morning.
Well, Maria, I was going to ask you, did I pass the test? Because
You passed the test.
I almost fainted. Okay, great. It's a doozy, but I got it. But thank you so much for being with us. It's good to see you again. And no doubt your presence here is going to impact careers in the audience. So I am absolutely thrilled and lucky to have Maria here on our panel. Maria joins us today as CFO of Huntress Labs, a high-growth unicorn cybersecurity SaaS business. She's an accomplished entrepreneurial growth stage executive from both private and public technology firms, and someone that's held multiple board seats, several CFO roles, and might I add, even a CEO role in her path. Maria was CFO previously at Code 42, which was acquired by Mimecast. During her tenure, she faced and successfully completed the pivoting of the company to a cybersecurity SaaS business while successfully spinning off its legacy business. Earlier on, she was CFO of Expel, a cybersecurity company that achieved a $1 billion valuation during her leadership. Maria is passionate about complex challenges and brings an infectious energy to everything that she does. She is a natural builder and leader of high-performing teams. She loves to travel, enjoys indoor rock climbing, and is a Virginia Tech accounting grad. Go Hokies! I have to say that because I went to Elon. You don't hear Go Phoenix that much, so I just root for everybody's schools. Maria is deeply committed to developing the next generation of leaders through her various local volunteer groups. Once again, Maria, welcome.
Thank you.
So you have done so much in your career, seen so much, interacted with leaders, been through transactions. I really admire your appetite for that next big challenge, just based on the years that I've known you. You began your rise as a CFO in the dot-com days. You probably saw numerous culture, influence various teams and leaders, push through M&A and transactions, and lots of other corporate happenings, as we might call them. Bottom line is, I think you've been running very fast for a very long time. I'd like to start off by asking you if you could share a little bit about how your journey has shaped your brand as a leader.
Well, it's a big question.
And I'm happy to repeat it.
Now, I think the way you described my background, I love new challenges. I love learning. Every day is a growth opportunity. So as I've thought through my career, as I look at each new stage of what I'm going to do next, I'm thinking through, what do I have to learn? What can I do again? Or where do I have gaps in my knowledge base? And so where my career has taken me is I've been in different industries. You've mentioned I've had different roles. I've been CEO, I've been CFO, I've been audit committee chair on a public company board. I've been in private and public VC, PE companies. And each one of those has shaped my thinking and helped me understand how all the pieces, not just in the business, but in the ecosystem that we're playing in, whether or not it's our customer base, it's our competition, it's the microeconomics of what's going on in our environment, how each one of those items shapes the financial statements and helps me think through the different levers in the business. If we're in a recession, we're more focused on profitability, but we also want to take advantage of the fact that our competition may not be investing in growth. And how do we put more gas on our growth pedal to take advantage of that opportunity in the market? So as I'm thinking about it from both the leaning in and learning perspective, understanding the financials from various different lenses in the business, understanding how do we operate differently in different environments. But through all that, I'm also working with different leaders. And I'm able to look at them and say, oh, I liked what you did. Now I need to learn how you did that because I want to emulate that. I want to be like you. And building this, oh gosh, it's not just a sense of camaraderie, but it's a sense of leaders that I want to continue to work with, that I want to be like, so I can elevate my own performance. And so it's sort of like I get to pick and choose all these different skills. I don't want to do that, but I want to do that. I want more of that. And I spend time with those leaders so I can learn how they do that, so that I can get better as well. So it's a little bit of a potpourri of different skills that I've picked up along the way, so that hopefully I'm the best leader that I can be today.
That's great. Thank you so much for elaborating. That was very interesting. And I had no doubt you were going to come at me with that style and approach and level of depth. And, it's interesting with these one-on-ones, I am trying to keep it high level. So thank you for keeping it high level, but very, very interesting. My second question for you, Maria, is, and I think this is very much attached to kind of what we just talked about, but how might you begin to articulate your eventual legacy as a CFO?
Big question for early in the morning. Um, and
Take your time.
as you described, I've been on my CFO journey for quite some time now. I'm probably closer to seeing that legacy transact than not. Um, I love the aspect of coaching and mentoring. The CFO role is naturally the coach and mentor to the CEO and to the rest of the executives, because the CFO is really the only other member of the executive team outside the CEO that sees the entire business, start to finish, end to end, and being able to connect all those dots. And then being able to share that information with the CEO or do the brainstorming around strategic initiatives, or where do we invest resources, but then also sharing that information with the other executives, helping them fill out their knowledge gap so that they are fully informed on how can they do better in their role. But then you can take that to the next level. How do you keep informing, educating, showing other individuals across the organization? How do you use all the information? How do you weave in the context of the operational levers? What are our stakeholders looking for? What is the board looking for? What are the metrics that are guiding the business? Making sure everybody understands the lens from which you are viewing the business. That just helps them make better decisions. One of the things I've learned, sometimes the hard way, is that you have to whisper information into people's ears, not just once, sometimes several times. And believe it or not, they typically come back with this great, amazing idea that they just thought of. And so the idea that I can continue to be that whisper of information, help influence people throughout the organization so that they're being elevated themselves and doing it in a way that makes them feel empowered, makes them feel like it's their own idea, is actually part of the role that I thoroughly enjoy.
Very well said. We do have a polling question for the audience. Very well said, Maria. Appreciate that. I would like to introduce my next panelists, Rob Smith. Rob, welcome.
Good morning.
It's my sincere pleasure to welcome Rob Smith, CFO and Corporate President of Crescent Hotels and Resorts, headquartered out of Fairfax, Virginia. Rob joined Crescent in 2015 as a first-time CFO and brings 35 years of experience from the hotel finance world. Crescent is consistently a top-ranked hotel operator each year and operates over 120 hotel and resort properties all over North America. Rob runs all finance, accounting, risk management, treasury, purchasing, and IT services for his company. Rob grew up in hotel-based positions where the only way out was doing everything. After 8 property finance leadership roles, he earned his way into both global and domestic corporate leadership roles. Before making the move to Crescent, Rob spent a very full 18 years at Interstate Hotels, now known as Aimbridge Hospitality, with his last post as Executive VP of Global Finance, babysitting 400 hotels worldwide, relying on his exceptional level of patience and composure, no doubt. Rob is a member of the Global Finance Committee, which is built from the American Hotel and Lodging Association and the Hospitality, Technology, and Finance Professionals. And Rob is entrusted with the responsibility for writing the uniform system of accounts for the lodging industry, the hotel industry's accounting standards. For those of us who know Rob, he'll never stop rolling up his sleeves and carries the golden rule around with him wherever he goes. Rob is an avid golfer, grew up around 3 brothers, and is a proud finance grad from Florida State University. Go Seminoles! Rob, welcome.
Morning. You better have gotten the Seminole plug in there somewhere. Thank you, Nat. That's a heck of an introduction.
Good to have you, Rob. Rob, you and I have known each other for some time. You continue a very successful and unique journey yourself. It's interesting when I think about the path for a CFO. In my 27 years of doing executive and professional recruiting, there's kind of the stereotypical 2 paths, right? You've got like certain CFOs graduate college, maybe get an MBA and go the iBanking route, or people go to public accounting and then launch up through accounting reporting into maybe a CAO role and then launch into a CFO role. One of the things that I really admire about your background and your story is I would say that you kind of have a little bit more of what I call a blue collar start, which I know we're going to hear a lot more about later. But all in all, you are a very unique CFO. It's great to have you here. And I'd like to jump right in and just ask you, you've experienced 10 years, because I've been following it, you've experienced 10 years of significant growth at Crescent Hotels since you came in as a CFO. What has that growth taught you about yourself? And how have you become better just over those 10 years?
Well, it's a very good question. We've seen a lot of things happen over the last 10 years. The first and foremost, the first thing that you got to realize is you are not the smartest person in the room. Okay. And, with growth, you realize how much you have to learn. Okay. It's great. And Maria was excellent in what she said. And being the mentor and the coach, that is a primary responsibility. But there's also things that you have to learn, and you have to embrace what others have to teach you, because you're going to go into areas that something can be brand new, and you realize that you need to have great people and a great team around you. You're not going to be the expert in everything. You're not going to be the expert in tax. You're not going to be the expert in risk management. You're not going to be the expert in IT. And hopefully you find some fantastic people that make up that team that you can rely on, to give you the advice that you need to move forward, as the CFO, making those decisions for the entire company.
Great. Appreciate that. And at a high level, this is always an interesting question, but I'm going to make you go back a little bit here. At a high level, what is it about who you were that has helped shape who you are today as a CFO?
As Maria said, these are tough questions for early in the morning. You know, when you're younger, you think you've got all the answers, and you're gung ho to move forward, and you want to move up, and you get this idea that your way is the best way, and with time and experience, you again realize that you don't have all the answers, and you have to humble yourself to say, okay, what is there out there that I need to learn? How do we move forward? Et cetera. I mean, it's you need to make decisions, and you grow over the years. You grow over the years with that experience, and then you realize that you have to make the decisions that, quite honestly, are not always going to be the most popular with everybody. But you have to be good. You need to be comfortable with those decisions that you're making, and say, hey, I've assumed this role. I've taken on this responsibility, and these are the decisions I'm going to make. Hopefully, like I said earlier, you're going to have those people around you that are going to help you make those decisions that are the best things for the company. And the best things in our case for our owners. We have, like you said, 120 hotels. We've got 75, 80 owners. You've got to make those decisions with them in mind as well, because that's your business.
And Rob, you've always had a very calm and collective approach to your days and your projects and your stresses and properties and such. I wonder if early on for you, was it hard to realize that your messages were being delivered and not received all the right way? Did you grow over time with that realization that as you get better as a CFO, that you'll have more confidence and ability to overcome criticism?
Yeah, I mean, perfect example is things like, we're going to talk about this in the future, or in coming up soon, but when COVID hit, everybody's looking at you going, all right, what are we going to do? How are we going to survive? And you've got to make some decisions. And, I'll be honest with you, we made those decisions without even thinking about it. And I was very comfortable with what we had to do to make sure this company came out on the back end. All right. And quite honestly, I'm pretty sure that our EC members, that are great friends and colleagues, I think they were pretty comfortable with the decisions we made as well. Over time, I tell people that I never wanted to be a CFO, or I never aspired. I shouldn't say didn't want to. It wasn't the biggest thing when I was EVP of Global. I was happy traveling all over the world. And then somebody asked me a question, and it was a pretty basic tax question. But then you realized after a 2-hour conversation that there was a lot more stuff that you had gained over all those years, and that was your next step. And that was where we needed to go. And so, sometimes people question it, and then results speak for themselves, and hopefully everybody gets comfortable. You get comfortable with the decisions you make, and everybody else gets comfortable with the decisions you make.
That's great. Thank you for that intro, Rob. I appreciate it.
Mm.
So Maria and Rob, the best part about this whole thing is I saved my toughest question for Doug. So I'm going to go ahead and water that down now. No, I'm just kidding. Doug, I'd love to introduce our third panelist, Doug Kuckelman. Doug, great to have you. We are very proud and excited to have Doug round out our CFO panel. Doug is the CFO for ICI Mutual Insurance, the leading provider of most liability insurance and fidelity bonding for the entire U.S. mutual fund industry. Doug oversees all finance and administrative functions for his firm. Prior to joining ICI Mutual, Doug amassed 20 years of leadership within finance, M&A, and corporate development at both public and private technology companies. As a CFO, Doug gets excited about coaching, mentoring, and providing development for his team. Doug brings a keen and stylish approach to the CFO seat through driving clear, meaningful relationships and highly efficient workflows. After graduating from JMU with an accounting degree, go Dukes! He started his career with 4 years of audit at EY. He loves to read, fly fish, and mountain bike. Doug, by the way, is also armed with an MBA from College Park to complement his active CPA license. Doug, once again, welcome.
Thanks, Nat. Appreciate the kind words, and I'm glad to be here.
Great. So getting right into it, you spent a little bit of time at your last company as acting CFO, if I'm not mistaken, and you are somewhat early into your CFO role at ICI. Knowing that you are what I might refer to as more of the newer CFO persona, or rookie, some might call it, what have the early lessons been for you, Doug?
Yeah, I think I'd pick up on some of the themes that have been mentioned earlier. For me, one of the clear, important elements that I picked up on is the importance of team, and learning from your team. And really, I think that's the key to your success, is having a solid team around you. I think the other big learning is really the importance of being a strategic partner to the rest of the leadership team. Maria mentioned the concept of a whisperer, and really having that oversight over lots of parts of the organization. I think that's a really critical role, and I've really tried to lean into that. And I think my experience, where I've come through different aspects and maybe a little bit of a non-traditional path to CFO. I spent time in M&A, investor relations, as well as accounting. And so I think that broad skill set has really allowed me to kind of come in and be that strategic leader within my organization.
And when you took over as CFO at ICI, tell me a little bit about the landscape that you adapted to, and tell me a little bit about coming into I would say, smaller company, smaller environment, smaller ecosystem. You're used to pretty big companies, minus maybe 1 or 2 tenures. I think that the position before ICI was a little bit of a smaller private equity backed opportunity. But how did you adapt to more of a small environment, less corporate, less broad?
So I think, you just have to get used to having a, oversight over more things and more purview into the business, as opposed to a large organization where you can be a little bit more siloed and have less visibility. In a smaller organization, you have much more visibility and actually a larger ability to enact, add value and enact change. So I think that's, one of the biggest distinctions from my perspective. And so it's been a relatively smooth transition, and been able to, really jump in, even though it's a new industry for me, jump in and be a key contributor.
That's great. And my next question kind of, actually, 1 second, just we have a polling question here. So my next question is not too dissimilar from what we were just talking about, but just curious to get your insight. Spending so much time at, the big chunks of your career was spent at AOL, at Tegna, at Gannett, moving around through accounting, reporting, SEC, M&A, corporate development. How do you think those experiences shaped your path to become a CFO?
I think one of the valuable parts of those different stints was, it gave me exposure to lots of different leaders and lots of different mentors. So, it was, and these were not necessarily formal mentorships or formal, relationships, but you got to see a lot of how these different leaders interacted, what they focused on, what their priorities were, how they approached problems, how they solved problems. And I think that was as valuable as any kind of MBA education, just really being have a seat at the table and being able to see how we processed and worked through key decisions.
Fantastic. Thank you for that intro. I really appreciate it. With that wraps up our one-on-one intros. We're going to dive right into our panel discussion. And once again, I appreciate the three of you being here and looking forward to kind of diving down below the clouds and getting into some raw detail here. Real strong takeaways for our audience of 1,500 plus to kind of reflect on their careers. So appreciate the high-level one-on-ones. And I'd like to begin with Maria for our first topic, if that's okay. And then I'm going to let you guys kind of run wild and interact, because that's what this is all about. This is supposed to be collaborative. But when you think about the topic of your path, your journey, and you're going to see a lot of themes with obviously talking about careers and navigating that path. But just in terms of thinking about early decisions and twists and turns and people that have impacted your career, mentors, guidance, Maria, I might wonder if you could share or talk about perhaps 1 to 2 pivotal early career moments that began to steer your path to becoming a CFO.
So I think the biggest thing for me was I was in .com days, early startup stage. I was the VP of finance at the time, and the CFO kept giving me opportunities. Go fix this, go solve that. I need somebody to go look at that problem. And these were things I'd never even heard of, never even touched. I knew nothing about. And he just let me run. I need somebody who's smart to go figure this out. And I did. And giving that freedom to solve problems across the business, the trust that he put in me, the trust that I put in myself, that I was going to figure this out, that if I had questions, I could go back to him with it. But I was given an opportunity that you don't get very often to just go figure it out. And I leaned into it. I didn't know what I was doing. I had no idea what the right outcomes were going to be. But I just tried to figure it out along the way. And that gave me a couple things. One, it gave me the confidence to try new things, regardless of how complex they were. It also gave me the opportunity to learn about the business. And that's really about like all the operational levers, how this happens over here impacts that happens over there, how operating, different departments was different, what their operational metrics were, and how that all rolls up to the company financial statements. That took it from my background of being a public auditor, the recording of the financials, to how does the business operate to get into those financials, to really come up with that understanding that there is absolutely nothing that happens in the business that doesn't end up in the financials, and how they end up in the financials. And once I started to understand that and be able to connect all those dots, like anything from, it took us longer to hire an employee, or our retention rates of our employees were lower, how that ended up in our financials, and how the culture impacted the financials. You don't necessarily think about that from an accountant position. And you think about, oh, great, we didn't hire that position, so now we're better against budget. But you don't think about the long-term implications of what that means to, can you achieve your goals? Once I started able to seeing that play out and connect the dots, I'm like, oh, I understand the business. Now I understand how to strategically guide the business forward. And that shifted my mindset from being an accountant to a finance person to a senior executive, on being able to be a strategic advisor across the organization. So it was a combination of just that learning experience, but also having confidence in myself because somebody else had confidence in me to go out and learn and try something different.
And before I go to Rob, I do want to pick away at something you said because I think it's very relevant to being a CFO or a leader in whatever capacity. You mentioned obviously someone trusted you, someone saw something in you, someone said, "Go figure it out, go figure it out." You know, go jump on this project, go jump on that grenade, whatever it was. Let's be honest, it doesn't always happen.
No.
And sometimes people and leaders, whatever their titles are, they're a little insecure. They're a little bit nervous about their job being taken or being threatened, or, oh, I like my little island of all the responsibilities I have. I don't want anybody coming near my island. Did you have the opposite? Did you have someone in your career that kind of kept you down? Did you try to fight through it and you didn't win and maybe perhaps you moved on? Tell me about an experience there.
Yes. I've had the goods and the bads. I think we all have. I've had the situation where, for example, I took a role. I was the first time I was an experienced CFO working in a business where the CEO had never had a CFO before. And they did not know how to utilize a CFO, understand the value, the strategic value. His mindset was the CFO was a controller, a bookkeeper. You're recording the finances. You're not involved in the strategic conversations. And it took a little while of me explaining how I can help him do his job better. Like, how do I elevate him? How do I elevate the organization? How do I bring this information forward? It took about 3 years for us to get into a rhythm. And that was really challenging, but it was patient waiting. It was showing examples. It was showing up the way I wanted to show up and help him see that value. On the flip side, I did that again in another situation and I did not break through. And ultimately I left because the CEO did not see the value of a strategic CFO. And it was a constant banging my head against the brick wall. And eventually the definition of insanity came into play. And I realized I was the one who was being insane and I needed to leave. So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But for me, I think my approach of showing up the way I wanted to be perceived, continue trying to show value first instead of waiting for them to ask me for the value, coming up and being the person that I wanted to be in the role I wanted to be in. I'm I'm still confident that the way I approached that second CFO was the correct one. It just wasn't a fit. And recognizing it wasn't a fit for me was the right time for me to go.
And my recruiter brain's going crazy here because I coach and counsel people daily and weekly. One small question for you: knowing our audience and knowing that people are looking for takeaways for their career and their success paths, is there an answer that can be thrown out there of how long you should wait until you've determined that you don't have the right boss?
Oh,
And by the way,
I
we're gonna get into
yeah.
resilience and grit, and we're gonna talk about professional fortitude. But I think these are key issues because we see people move jobs without really trying, and then I guess the question would be, are you really trying, and what does really trying mean?
Yeah, I mean, yes, great question. Both as I'll call it the employee as well as the leader. Um, I think it depends. And that's a hard answer, but it's, are you making progress? Have you sat down with your CEO in my case or your leader and talked through expectations? Here's how I want to show up. Are you actually showing up that way? Do you understand your expectations and what good looks like? And does that match? Like, does what the CEO want and what you want to deliver match? And are you making progress in closing that gap between the two things? I think if you're making progress and you feel fulfillment in your role, keep trying. if you think that path is going to get to you what you want. If you wake up every morning dreading going to work because the role that you're in isn't satisfying and it's just frustrating, you're not going to show up and be your best. That may be the right time to leave. But it is case by case, personal. There's so much that goes into that decision. So it's hard to give a definitive answer, but I do think you have to do a lot of work first to see if it's the right fit.
Okay, before Rob mutes me, I'm going to let him go.
Well, there's so many things that Maria is saying that I can just sit here and agree with wholeheartedly. First of all, I don't believe there's not a right answer to that. You need to say, okay, what is my plan? What is the plan for the company? And as she said, are you making progress? I was 2 months into being CFO at Crescent. And, I have a great relationship with our CEO and founder. But early on, I was making decisions and Nat, you're fully aware of this. When I came in, there was a lot of things that had to be changed and a lot of things that had to be fixed. And like I said earlier, there's decisions that had to be made that were not always popular with everybody. And, one day the CEO and I are talking and he's saying, well, I heard about this and I heard about that. And my answer was plain and simple. I knew coming in, I knew coming into this role that I had 60 pages of notes of things that I knew needed to look at. And, here he was questioning me on my notes. And my answer to him was, if you want to run this company the way you have for the first 15 years, I'm not your guy. And you need to give me the ability to do what we need to do. And here we are 10 years later that he's saying, okay, I'm glad we had that conversation. So, going back to your original question about, things that catapulted you or into the role that you're in now. And, one of the things that you have to be ready to do is take on whatever challenge there is. And, I was lucky. I've been extremely lucky in my career to have great people to work with and great mentors. Just like I was saying, we need to mentor others. I had some great mentors. And probably the very first thing that ever got me moving. And I got into this business by accident. I didn't plan on doing this. I was in banking. I was I'm going to go be a bank president somewhere. And my first month end closing, my main mentor is good close friend to this day. One night he walks in my office, he says, month end is yours. I'm going home. I'm like, what do you mean you're going home? And he left me there. And quite honestly, I was in my office till 11:30, 12 o'clock at night, closing the books. And I'm not going to say there wasn't a lot of cussing going on late at night. But it was the single biggest thing that he could have done, best thing that he could have done for me. Okay. Now, did I get everything right? No. And the next day we met and we went through the things I got wrong, and a year later I had my first property, and 2 years later I was on my second property. And just like Maria was saying, all of a sudden now you're tasked for going to all the problem properties, or you're going to all the problems and you go in to fix it. And then you say, okay, what's the next thing? And then, of course, international. I never would have thought I'd be having an office in 5 different countries, okay, and traveling all over the world and working on things. And you learn about things like tax and international tax and repatriating of cash and Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. And you sit there and you go, these are all challenges. They're all challenges that you take on and you move forward and you learn and you go, okay. Now we can keep going. So there's a lot of things, but I mean, having great mentors, we're going to talk more about this, but train. You've had great mentors, carry it forward. and be the mentor for the next person. And as Maria said a couple of times, is make sure that, you know, you've got some great colleagues to work with, get their buy-in, because you're going to be successful if they're successful. And yes, I mean, the biggest, you know, we talk about everything is financial related. It doesn't matter what it is. You know, everybody knows the basic law of economics. There ain't no such thing as a free lunch. Everything's got a cost, and everything hits the bottom line. All right. So everything we do comes back one way or another, comes back to that P&L. And that's what people have to understand, because everybody's are in their silos. Okay. And they're thinking that this is what I need. But we need to say, what does the company need? What does the organization need? What does everybody need? Yeah.
Just to pick up on a couple of points, Nat, if you don't mind. So I think, you know, just keying off of what folks have said about taking on opportunities. I think to the extent you're not necessarily being asked to take on something, I think raising your hand and seeking out those opportunities is also equally as important. I think there's nothing I appreciate more from someone on my team is when they raise their hand and say, I'd like to work on this. I'd like to learn this new thing. You know, I'd like to, you know, fix this problem. I mean, that's going to get noticed, and that's, you know, always going to be appreciated. I think, you know, in my career, you know, it was asked to step into an investor relations role that I had really no background or, you know, prep for. And there was an activist in the stock, and it was a sort of learning from, you know, drinking from the fire hose, as they say. So, you know, you take those opportunities that are given to you, and then also seek out opportunities as well, because I think that also allows you to kind of take control of your career and figure out, you know, how you want to navigate and what you like to work on, and you know, shape it to some extent, because it's really up to each of us to do that.
Doug, just to jump in real quick. So when you got that opportunity to be in investor relations, I'm curious, you know, the basic question is, were you nervous? And did you feel like you had, I mean, A, were you nervous? B, did you have to talk to anybody about making that leap of faith? And, you know, tell me a little bit about that moment.
Sure. So it was interesting timing too, because it was March of 2020. So it was right when, you know, when everybody was exiting the offices and working from home. So it was, you know, a little bit scary just on that front. And then to be asked to step into a new role that was brand new was definitely daunting. But you know, I've always had sort of a growth, you know, mindset in terms of, you know, I'll figure it out. And these types of opportunities are, you know, this is where the learning comes from. This is where, you know, you get these opportunities don't come along all that frequently. So, you know, lean into it and figure it out. But it was certainly scary and nerve-wracking. But you know, the key is to find your mentors and your, you know, experts around you that you can, you know, lean in, you know, ask questions of, and you know, get advice from, so that you're able to function and kind of figure it out. But also don't be afraid to make mistakes, because that's going to happen. And that's also part of the process, I think.
And Doug, when you got that investor relations opportunity, were you already 75% on the CFO path, or did that influence your decision to become a CFO?
It did. I was already kind of in that mindset, and I think that may have been led to some of the decision making around putting me in that role. So it was reinforced my career path decision, as opposed to, you know, being the sort of starting point for it.
Okay, great. Great answers, guys. Thank you so much for jumping in. The next topic I want to unpack is, and I guess this is kind of related to pivotal moments in your career, but have you had any, as I call it, seemingly disastrous situations that you found yourself, and how did you learn into that or those moments? So bad situations, disastrous situations, what am I doing here? Why the heck am I in the middle of this problem? And how did you, with help or not help, lean into these situations and make it better for your career? I'm going to throw it out to the group.
Well, early on, everything, as we were talking about earlier, a disastrous situation is just another opportunity. Okay. And Beginning of my career, Nat, yeah, everything was a disastrous situation. Okay, we got a problem here, go fix it. As Maria was saying, we got a problem there, go fix it. I'd tell everybody I spent 15 wonderful months in Detroit at a property that, quite honestly, I thought was going to probably end my career. But it actually turned out to be fantastic. And you just got to sit there and say, okay, you say, what am I doing here? Okay, lay out the plan. What is the plan to get to the other side? And that's the way you've got to look at it. I mean, there's a lot of things that come your way, and you can't fold up and go home. And you've got to just sit there and say, okay, how do we get there, and what will it take? So every day there's a challenge, and honestly, it comes with business. Is the way I look at it, and you've just got to keep going, moving forward. Just keep moving forward. That's the only way I can say look at it. I mean, I've never had anything that there's never been anything that I've truly walked away from in this business.
I think one of the lessons I had to learn as a leader came out of those challenging, disastrous moments where I walked in to solve a problem, and I saw the answer in my head. I rared, I've got my plan. I'm ready to go. Let's go do it. Implemented the plan, executed it, and nobody followed me. And it was this really great, unfortunate learning event where I realized I have to bring everyone along. I have to share what I'm doing, not just what I'm doing, but the whys behind what I'm doing. And a lot of times people don't understand the whys. And so I had to back up 3 to 4 steps and share the whys, help educate along the way how this is important, how this impacts the individuals, how it helps them grow, how it helps shape them, let them get trust in me as a leader and what I'm doing, so that we can all move forward together. And so I had to learn to pause, which I'm not really good at. I don't have a lot of patience. I see the answer. I'm like, let's just go do it. But if I'm the only one who sees the answer, then I'm the only one who can solve the problem. If I share the reasons why, the reasons how, then everybody knows how to solve the problem. We work on it as a team. And then when another problem shows up, everybody else now knows has the foundation to be able to go solve it. And that was a really big lesson for me to understand that just because I see it, I understand it, doesn't mean everybody else does. And so I had to change how I lead, which was difficult for me because pausing is not an easy thing for me to do. And that was a big leadership lesson.
Yeah, and I
Doug,
think,
any thoughts?
yeah, I was just gonna say, I think the situation, you have to look at the situation specifically too, because I think in some circumstances, you need to act quickly, and sometimes you have to play that sort of more top down, this is the way we're going, and we need to get this done, because otherwise, there could be a disaster on our hands.
Sorry to
think there's
interrupt.
other-
Sorry to interrupt, Doug. Polling question 4, guys, up on the board.
Thanks, Grant.
Sorry, Doug.
No worries. I think in other times, things are, you can take your time and be a little bit more thoughtful, ask questions, learn from, learn what the current state of the situation is, really dig in, and then take that time to kind of plot the course forward using, the full team to really think through the problem solving of it, and sort of make it a group effort as opposed to a single person driving the change. So I think I just wanted to point that out, that I think in some circumstances, some of these disaster situations, you've got a little bit more runway, and therefore take advantage of that.
And I think in talking to job seekers for a living and working with clients to try to find matches, you hear a lot of tales from the dark side. You hear a lot of like massive challenges and this is not what I signed up for, and every day is a mess, and I don't see my kids, and I'm working 80 hours a week, and quite frankly, nobody really wants to do that. They end up finding themselves in those terrible places. And you hear comments like, careers are made in crisis. When the building's on fire, some people run in, some people run out. Some really interesting analysis on those situations out there. But I guess the question is, do we think that there is a definition of a balance for a CFO, or do you think that you have to sign up to be a CFO and realize that there's just going to be curveballs and there's going to be monsters and there's going to be lots of different challenges? I mean, is there something called balance for a CFO?
Yes, I think there is. But it goes back to what we've all been talking about, and that is having a quality team around you, not just the financial team, but your colleagues in other disciplines in the organization. And, it goes back to the basics in my case as a director of finance at a hotel. Okay. And, Maria was hitting on she laid out this plan, nobody followed it. Well, a lot of times people are not following because they don't understand finance. And many of them, quite honestly, are scared of finance. They're scared of the numbers. And it's not really, I mean, we're all sitting here on this call, and for us, these things are second nature. For many people, it's not. And so the balance comes with helping educate those other people, because the more that we've got them doing what we need them to do, or what is the right thing to do, our lives become immensely easier. Okay. Now, is it always going to be that way? No. As I said, there's going to be challenges every single day. And it's whether it's a challenge with an owner, a challenge with a bank, a challenge with a brand. There's always going to be challenges. Healthcare issues. You can name them. Right? That just comes, that is part of it. But something, and that you have to make time. You have to have some sort of semblance of normality to continue to move forward. If all you do every day is put out fires, if that is your only job, then that's not going to last that long either. Okay.
Yeah, I was
Go
gonna
ahead,
say,
Doug. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, I think, that's actually a bit of a warning sign. I think if you're constantly putting out fires and it's, it's one crisis after another, I think that would suggest that, maybe, you need to take a step back and look at your processes and your team and figure out, where's what's going on here? What's the root cause? Because that sounds like a situation where it's maybe a little bit of a self-inflicted wound. So take a step back and revisit your processes so that you can get out of that, swirl and into a more strategic place where you can spend time analyzing and providing insights as opposed to putting out fires.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with both Rob and Doug, but I think Dave, you said it in the chat that if you can plan for 80% of every day being people process systems, you automate. My background, I've been, and my career is in growth stage tech startup companies. So every day is different. Every day is new. You're always trying to iterate. You're growing. You're trying new things. I don't believe there's a balance. I think it's an integrated life. And now that, working from home does make it a little bit easier to have that integrated life, I think for me, it's more about setting boundaries. This is my work time. This is my personal time. And I try and be very diligent around which is which, so that my personal time is protected, so that when I'm with my family, it is family time. I am focused on my family. But and set my own, my definitive work hours, so that I do have that personal life. But being in the career that I've been in with the type of companies that I've been in, it's been challenging to have balance. So it's more about setting boundaries.
And this may be somewhat related to that question, but when I think about your paths as becoming CFO, or really any leadership position for that matter, and you might receive advice out of those situations or out of those juggernauts. But what, as a CFO, and I'll throw it to the group, what's the best advice that you've gotten from a leader in your career?
I'll take a stab at it. This has been somewhat, we've covered this, I think, on some level, but the one that keeps coming back to mind from my experience has been, be a strategic partner, not a gatekeeper. And that's a little cliche, but I think it really is a good point that, it's easy to say no, but often what you need to do is help problem solve and figure out, there are things that you certainly need to, put your foot down and be definitive about and not pursue, but there are also things where, you need to, think proactively about how to enable growth, how to, unlock this particular area, so that, you can pursue things in that particular spot versus just saying no and being, kind of keeping a very myopic, closed environment.
That early on in my career, I wasn't even a director of finance. I was an assistant director of finance at the time. And I remember my general manager coming in my office at 7 o'clock in the morning and, sat down across from me. And he used to walk the entire property every morning. And we were sitting there talking, and he says, "Well, Rob, most people are scared of you." And I looked at him and I was like, "What do you mean there?" He goes, "You intimidate people." And I said, "Well, I don't mean to." He says, "No," he says, "I know you don't mean to. It's just that you're, spewing off all these numbers and you're going on this and you're going on that." The biggest takeaway from that and the discussion with him is, remember who you're dealing with, okay, and help them understand. And to this day, I will tell you, every time I interview a director of finance, a VP, a regional director of finance, a VP of finance, and I ask them one question: what is your main goal as a finance professional in this business? And I get a myriad of different answers. Okay, but I'm looking for one answer. I'm a mentor and an educator. Okay, and that was 35, 36 years ago. And to this day, it still sits there. I remember that conversation like it was yesterday. And you constantly got to remember who you're dealing with. Remember what you want them to do and how you want to get there. And we've all talked about get buy-in on these things. And the more they understand, the more they're going to buy in, and the more they're going to understand. So that was probably the single biggest bit of advice coming from outside. This is coming from the general manager, not from another finance person, but that's what I needed to hear.
Yeah, I would echo both Rob and Doug's comments, and Rob, I've gotten that same
Sorry, Maria, just real quick. Polling question number 5 is out, guys. Thanks.
The same feedback in my career that people are scared of me, and I'm like, how can you be scared of me? But it is the same. It's all about communication. It's how do you communicate, how do you share, how do you educate, but it's also understanding how you communicate to different audiences, how you communicate to the staff versus how do you communicate to the board of directors. The board of directors isn't looking for necessarily a replay of the numbers. They can read the financial reports in the board presentation that you provided to them. What they want to hear is, what's the story of the business? They want to know, what do they need to know as board members? How do they need to help the business, or how do they need to be strategic, thinking through what are the next, the next 5 steps that the business needs to do. And that took me a little while to understand that they didn't see the story through the numbers. I had to tell them the story that's happening in the numbers. Tell them what they need to know was a concept that I certainly had to spend a lot of time grasping and adjusting my communication style.
That's great. And this kind of connects to the next kind of series of questions, which I'm pretty passionate about. I think it's going to get kind of chunky and juicy here. We're going to talk about a lot of personality traits and kind of the ability to fight through tough situations. But I do think, and this is kind of my thinking on this topic, is people go to good schools, people go to Big Four public accounting, people go to banks, people get on this treadmill sometimes, and they just assume their careers are going to blossom for them. And sometimes these people actually don't even have a mentor after 7, 8, 10 years. It blows my mind. And, as recruiters, we end up like trying to give them advice and try to establish whether this person's actually ever had a mentor. But speaking on the topic of kind of what I call professional fortitude, resilience, people talk about grit. Do you guys feel like, if you think about, God, the last 25, 30 years even, thinking about things like 9/11, Enron Anderson, the Great Recession, the pandemic, we've been through tumultuous times over the past 20, we'll call it 25 years, 26 years. What would be your message to up and comers about overcoming challenges, building resilience? I think just working to persevere in general.
Yeah, I think we've talked a little bit about it, but I think, challenges are really where the growth opportunities come from. I mean, maybe, by chance ended up working at companies that were, in either really had some serious headwinds from a revenue perspective, or had some really fundamental problems. And some people, I think, would view those as, these are distressed situations. I don't want to be there. But I think those companies were actually terrific learning environments, because there were more problems to work on. There were more things to learn about. There were, it wasn't easy. And I think that's where you kind of cut your teeth. And so I am a firm believer in sort of seeking those types of opportunities out, because I really think that that's kind of what is going to help you develop. I think if you go to work for a company where everything's moving up and to the right, I think you're not going to see the same types of experiences.
Doug is absolutely right. I mean, you don't, Nat, yeah, like I said, you're fully aware when I was looking to leave at that time Interstate, and there's a couple of different companies I was looking at, and I could have gone to, but you want to take on the one with a challenge, because honestly, personally, I would be totally bored if I didn't have a challenge. Now, with that said, with some of the things that we have encountered over the last 30 years, and I can remember almost every one of them, these major events, it truly amazes you about people and team at that point. And people don't know what they're made of until they're faced with those types of challenges. And all of a sudden you see what everybody's made of, and you see what they're going to do as a team to come together. And so this is not all about you. This is about sacrifices from the many, and how do they all come together to get through the adversity. And I have seen some great things over my career. And every one of them, you sit there and you go, oh my God, and I'm not going to lie, COVID was probably the biggest, because you're shutting down the world, and you go, how do we get by this? And then all of a sudden people just coming out of the woodwork with different ideas and different things to do. So it truly is amazing to me. And we all said it earlier, is challenges are another opportunity to learn.
Rob, I'm going to throw a quick dart at you, if you don't mind. So thinking about that topic and thinking about motivating people and inspiring people to peel back that next layer of effort, you have someone come to your office and they're having a tough time, and maybe they give their resignation, maybe they're talking about how they can't go on. There's chemistry between a boss and a subordinate. There's chemistry between in an organizational chart. Sometimes there's a lack of chemistry. I guess the question is, how do you know how far you can motivate someone to persevere versus actually identifying that maybe it's not the right place for them based on the feedback that they're giving you?
Well, oh, that's a really good question. It's you have to look at each one of those people, and you're going to get to know them over time. Again, when I first took over Crescent, I had somebody working for us, and within a month of me being here, he actually came in and he resigned. And because within a month, he said, "I don't even know half of what you're doing." And he'd been here for a while, but in that case, he had been put in a position without any direction, and he was set up to fail. And so I asked him, "Don't do that yet." I said, "We don't know yet." I said, "Why don't you give it, let's give it 6 months. And if you still feel at that time, or if we both feel at that time that it's not the right move for you, or it's not the right position for you, we'll make that decision." And fair enough. And he said, "Absolutely." And to this day, he's still a good friend. He does not work for the company any longer. But he's still a very close friend. He appreciated the position. He's got a great job. And then there's those other people that have been here, they've been through tough times, and you got to sit there and say, "Slow down, take a breath. Let's look at this situation. And is it something that is happening right now and only now, and let's move past it? Or is it a long-term thing?" So you have to look at that, each individual, and you're going to know your team, especially if they've been with you for a long time. All right. And many of those people that might come to you and resign for other reasons, and you have to sit there and say, they've got a great opportunity. Yes, I would love for them to stay because it would make my life easier. Okay. Don't stand in the way of a person and their family and what's right for their family. Okay. And don't stand in the way of their career. If it is a good move for them, support that, let them go. And something, if you need something, I'm sure they're going to pick up the phone to help you get an answer on something they were working on.
And just a quick housekeeping note for the audience. Appreciate all your contributions to the Q&A. We're going to spend about 10 minutes at 9:40 going through some of the Q&A with our panel, just to give you guys a heads up. So I want to dig a little bit deeper into the fortitude, the resilience, the grit topic. I'm gonna introduce the elephant: COVID pandemic. How has that changed your perception and your ability to react to the human behavior that was birthed during COVID? I don't think any of us saw this coming. It was a career-defining, a lifetime-defining moment for all of us. And before I throw it over to you guys, we saw lots of behaviors start. We saw rules being made up. We saw people moving out of the area thinking they could keep their jobs. Some did, some didn't. We saw people working 2 jobs. We saw lots of very irregular behavior. We saw expectations not being set properly. What has happened to the workforce, positive and negative? Who wants to tackle that one?
Rob, you probably have more of it, and maybe more of an impact in your world, given the hotel nature of your business. For the tech world, it did change things. A lot of tech has stayed home. Huntress is a fully remote organization, and so we've always been fully remote, even before COVID. And so what is woven into the fabric of the organization is, how do you operate as a remote organization? How do you set expectations? How do you make sure that managers are setting what is expected of each employee at each moment in time, and how those expectations build up to the entire organization's initiatives and what we're trying to achieve? But I think the world in itself has introduced new challenges. And coming from Huntress, we are a cybersecurity company. it introduces a lot more ability for threat actors to infiltrate your organization. Recruiting, I'm sure you've seen, fake employees, fake recruiting announcements, those types of things. You have to think about the world differently. You no longer can lock down your environment. People are working from remotely from their homes. I think it's just changed that operating environment so dramatically. But I think what we see from a technology company perspective is probably a lot different than Rob than what you see in your environment.
Yeah, I mean, we what's funny is, Maria said they've always been remote. Um, and to be honest, as a hotel company and having properties all over the place, we've got remote workers as well. We've got regionals, whether it's regional operations, regional finance, regional sales, they're all over and they cover different areas. But we've also got our corporate office here in Fairfax. And I used to have 40 people a day in this office. Okay. Now I probably have, and people are staggered. And I'm the only person here that comes in, and I'm here 4 days a week. It's a little bit different on that front, and honestly, I'm the person that's had to learn to live with that. Okay, I've had to learn to accept that we're never going to get back to having everybody here. Now, I can have everybody here if I need them to be here, but for the most part, they're all on a rotating schedule. And sometimes that's challenging because I don't want to get on a video conference call to ask a question that I usually can walk, 10 steps out my door and ask the same question. So there's definitely challenges, but, it was funny because I've had video conference calls going on long before COVID. It just went on steroids after that. Now we're on video conference calls every day. So again, it's another one of those new challenges, and you say, okay, that's the way of the world, and how do we move forward? And old guys like me have to learn new tricks, and so.
Yeah, I mean, just to echo what others have said, it certainly accelerated the adoption of technology and collaboration tools and things like that across our business. I think the other consequence, or maybe thing we haven't talked about yet, is it really got us thinking from an enterprise risk management perspective. What are some of the unknowns out there, or some of the risks that we should actually put on the board and start thinking about and have a contingency plan for. So I think it started a lot of contingency planning and thinking through black swan events like that so that we're more prepared, hopefully, for the next time.
And do you think that there's a polling question number 6, by the way, everybody? Going back to kind of the idea of balance, and obviously this is directly related to COVID and the adaptation that we all had to make sure that our employees were coming to work, our employees had their expectations set properly, that we had sound recruiting processes and expectations. I can't tell you how many times over the past 5 years we've had companies say one thing and then they make an offer and they say, oh yeah, we'd like she or he in the office 4 days a week. Meanwhile, the whole time we were recruiting them, it was 1 to 2. That does not make our job any easier. So I guess the question is there a balance? Now that we know we've been through COVID, how would you guys script the balance, and how do you take old school thinking about 5 days in the office and take new school thinking about, what, Jack or Jane actually gets a lot done from home? In fact, I would even argue that during the pandemic, people had trouble shutting down because their kitchen was their office and their chat alert was going off left and right. And so what is that balance? What does it look like now that the dust has settled? I'm going to shut up and not throw my opinion here, but I want to hear from you guys on this.
So I've worked in in office 100%, old days. I've worked in hybrid, partly at home, partly at the office, where everybody had to be in the office on the same days, and now fully remote. I will say my favorite was hybrid, because you do get a lot more collaboration a lot more quick conversations, a lot more in-depth, off-the-fly conversations when you are in person, in my opinion. And that is easier to do when everybody is in there on the same days at the same point of time. But we also have the option to go home and be more productive, have more of that integrated life, that you can get a lot done when you're not constantly being interrupted by people walking into your office. So I preferred the hybrid environment. I will never go back to full-time in office. That's not for me. But I think each one has its benefits for different types of work styles.
Yeah, I think Maria hit the nail on the head. You've got to do what's right for you. Like I said, when I'm not traveling, I'm in the office, 4 days a week. I work from home on Fridays. But, on any given Friday, I may come in to meet with somebody here in the office if it's easier. And then there's a day that I might have to be at the house. So the beauty of it is that you can make those decisions and plan around it. If I know that I have a complete day of calls, I don't need to be sitting in my office here. I can do that from the house, or, you just learn of a new way of doing it. And, I'm not going to make everybody be here on specific days. Somebody was in my office 2 days ago, and he made the comment that on his company, they've said that everybody has to be in on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Okay. I'm not going to do that. Right now, it's working for everybody. We've gotten down to a really good schedule. And if it's working for everybody and everybody's getting their job done. Now, if you have somebody that's not getting their job done, then you got to revisit it. But honestly, all of our folks are getting their jobs done. No.
Yeah, I mean, I think hybrid's optimal as well. I think it gives everybody flexibility. I think the key though is just having some overlap within teams, so that you do have that collaboration and the ability to kind of connect in person, because that is super valuable from my perspective, but certainly doesn't need to be 5 days a week.
Well, before we close, as they bring the deck up, I'll just say that Cherry Bekaert released its recent survey, Modernization in Motion, Insights from Middle Market CFOs, that polled senior finance executives at companies sized between 5 million and 250 million across diverse industries. The research aimed to uncover strategic priorities, operational challenges, modernization readiness, and emerging trends, while also providing actionable insights for both enterprise transformation and financial leadership. And so we're very much in line with what we talked about today and what Nat and the group discussed. And here are some of the key summary priorities and pain points that came from that survey. Obviously, modernization is urgent. Almost 100% of the CFOs responded that they're going to be doing financial modernization in the next 12 months. Concerns are data integration is the top barrier. Data accuracy issues driving that. Forecasting needs a reset. Nearly 50% said poor data quality limits forecasting and decision making. That there's talent gaps that threaten the process or progress for the organization. And the other thing that I think we all know is CFOs are becoming and have been strategic partners. So more than half responded that yes, we are strategic partners in the growth and development of the company. So in order to download your copy of the report, the modernization survey, please go to cbh.com/CFO survey. You will also receive this link in the follow-up FEF thank you email that will be coming out over the next couple of days, but don't miss an opportunity to download this very topical and current report. Also, you can view all the FEF sessions by clicking on or using the QR code there. They're all recorded and available at any time. And then finally, the last slide for this year, I'd like to thank our exceptional marketing and support team at Cherry Bekaert, including Leah Gearhart, Eunice Arias, Aaron Riley, for preparing and running today's and all 6 of our events. Just a tremendous job. A lot goes on behind the scenes. And finally, I'd like to thank all of our sponsors for their support of the 2025 Financial Executive Forum, and especially Cordia Resources by Cherry Bekaert for their great program today. Again, thank you to the team. It was just tremendous. And to the group, everyone attending, thank you. We hope you enjoyed this year's Financial Executive Forum, and we look forward to seeing you again next year. Thank you.